Wyoming Territory, 1878. The blistering summer sun beat down on the dust-choked trail as Owen Crawford adjusted his weathered Stetson hat. At 25, Owen had already lived more lifetimes than most men twice his age. The harsh Wyoming frontier had carved his lean, muscular frame through years of ranch work and cattle drives, but it had hardened his heart even more. "No point in getting attached to anything out here," he muttered to his faithful buckskin horse, Ranger. "Just you and me against the world, boy." He surveyed the vast expanse of rugged countryside stretching toward the distant mountains. 2 years ago, he'd purchased this small plot with savings from his cowboying days, determined to build something that was his alone. A man could disappear into these hills, and that suited Owen just fine. The frontier had taught Owen one brutal lesson after another since he'd ridden west at 16. Trust was a luxury, and love was a fantasy that got people killed. The memory of finding his mentor and friend, old Jeb Wilson, murdered by rustlers 3 years back remained a festering wound. Jeb had made the mistake of taking in a drifter, showing kindness to a stranger who repaid him by slitting his throat and stealing his cattle. The frontier's no place for soft hearts, Owen reminded himself, a mantra he'd repeated since Jeb's death. His small ranch was finally taking shape, a modest cabin, a sturdy corral, and a dozen head of cattle. It wasn't much, but it was his, and he answered to no one. Independence was all he needed, or so he'd convinced himself. As Owen approached the creek that marked his property's eastern boundary, Ranger's ears pricked forward. The horse snorted, pawing nervously at the ground. "What is it, boy?" Owen quieted his voice, instantly alert. His right hand instinctively moved to the Colt revolver holstered at his hip. In these parts, unexpected visitors rarely brought good news. A faint sound carried on the wind, not the dangerous sounds he'd trained himself to recognize, but something altogether different, a woman's voice calling for help. Owen hesitated. Getting involved in others' troubles was exactly the sort of thing he avoided, but something in the desperate tone pulled at him despite his better judgment. "Damn it all," he muttered, turning Ranger toward the sound. "Just to make sure nobody's dying, then we're heading straight back." He rode through a thicket of scrub brush, following the increasingly frantic calls until he reached a small clearing. There, attempting to climb down from a precarious perch on a boulder ledge, was a young woman in a dusty blue traveling dress. Her horse, a nervous-looking chestnut mare, pranced anxiously several yards away. "Hold still, miss," Owen called, dismounting quickly. "You're liable to break your neck that way." The young woman froze, her wide blue eyes finding him with a mixture of relief and wariness. Her blonde hair had mostly escaped its pins, falling in waves around a heart-shaped face that was smudged with dirt but unmistakably beautiful. "Oh, thank heavens," she breathed. "I thought no one would find me out here." Owen approached cautiously, assessing the situation. The ledge she'd somehow climbed onto was about 7 feet high, with no easy way down. "What in tarnation are you doing up there?" he asked, genuinely puzzled. She flushed with embarrassment. "My horse spooked at a rattlesnake. I fell off and scrambled up here when I spotted another snake. Then my horse ran off, and when I finally caught her, I couldn't figure out how to get down without falling." She bit her lip. "I've been stuck here for nearly 2 hours." Despite himself, Owen felt a smile tugging at his lips. He quickly suppressed it. "Just jump down, I'll catch you." She looked skeptical. "I don't even know who you are." "Owen Crawford, this is my land you're trespassing on." He extended his arms. "Now jump before I change my mind and leave you to the rattlesnakes." The young woman's eyes widened, but she seemed to realize she had little choice. With a small, frightened sound, she pushed herself off the ledge and landed squarely in Owen's arms. The impact sent them both tumbling onto the soft grass. For one disorienting moment, Owen found himself staring into the bluest eyes he'd ever seen, their faces inches apart as he caught her fall. He quickly set her on her feet and stepped back, unnerved by the sudden proximity. "Thank you, Mr. Crawford," she said, smoothing her rumpled dress. "I'm Penelope Abbott." "Most people call me Penny." "What are you doing out here alone, Miss Abbott?" Owen asked, his voice gruffer than he intended. "These parts aren't safe for unaccompanied ladies." "I'm traveling to Clearwater to take a teaching position," she replied. "My guide had to turn back when his horse came up lame. He assured me I could make the final 10 miles on my own." She glanced around at the unfamiliar landscape. "I believe I may have taken a wrong turn." Owen sighed heavily. Clearwater was a good 15 miles northeast, completely opposite from the direction she'd been heading. "You're lost," he stated flatly, "and it'll be dark in a couple hours." Penny lifted her chin defiantly. I am merely temporarily misplaced. Despite his determination to remain detached, Owen found himself impressed by her spirit. Most city women would be in hysterics by now. Well, Miss Temporarily Misplaced, you're about to get a whole lot more lost if you keep heading that way. Clearwater's in the opposite direction, and there's nothing but wilderness for 40 miles where you're headed. Her shoulders slumped slightly. Oh dear. Owen knew what he should do, point her in the right direction and send her on her way. Getting involved with strangers only invited trouble, but the setting sun and the young woman's obvious exhaustion forced his hand. My ranch is about 2 miles back, he said reluctantly. You can stay the night and I'll escort you to Clearwater tomorrow. Relief flooded her face. That's very kind of you, Mr. Crawford. It's not kindness, he corrected. Just common sense. Can't have a schoolteacher dying on my property. Bad for business. She smiled as though she saw right through his gruff exterior, which irritated him further. Of course. Purely practical considerations. As they rode toward his cabin, Penny on her mare and Owen on Ranger, he found himself stealing glances at his unexpected guest. She sat properly in her side saddle despite her disheveled appearance, suggesting proper Eastern upbringing. How old are you, Miss Abbott? He asked suddenly. 22, she answered, and you needn't worry, Mr. Crawford. I'm quite capable of defending my virtue should that be your concern. She patted the small handbag at her side. My father insisted I carry a derringer when traveling west. Owen nearly choked. I wasn't. That's not what I meant. Of course not, she said with a smile that suggested she was enjoying his discomfort. I simply wanted to assure you that offering shelter to a lady in distress won't compromise your reputation. By the time they reached his cabin, Owen was regretting his decision. Miss Penelope Abbott talked entirely too much, asking questions about his ranch, his background, and how he'd come to Wyoming. He answered in monosyllables, hoping she'd take the hint. The cabin was sparse but clean, one main room with a stone fireplace, a rough-hewn table with 2 chairs, a small kitchen area, and a curtained-off sleeping section. It's not much, Owen said as he lit a lantern, suddenly conscious of his humble surroundings. Penny looked around with genuine interest. You built this yourself. He nodded, unsure why her approval should matter. It's wonderful, solid craftsmanship. She ran her fingers along the carefully joined table. My father was a carpenter before he became a preacher. He would admire your work. Owen busied himself starting a fire, uncomfortable with her praise. You can take the bed. I'll sleep by the fire. I couldn't possibly displace you. It's not up for discussion, he interrupted. I've slept on harder ground than my own floor. While Owen tended to the horses, Penny insisted on preparing supper from his modest supplies. He returned to find her at the stove, humming softly as she stirred a pot of beans and bacon that smelled better than anything he'd managed to cook for himself. They ate in silence, though not the uncomfortable kind Owen expected. Afterward, he noticed her stifling yawns. You should rest, he said, standing to clear their plates. We'll leave at first light. Penny nodded gratefully. Thank you for your kindness today, Mr. Crawford. I dread to think what might have happened if you hadn't found me. Just happened to be riding that way, he muttered, uncomfortable with her gratitude. After she disappeared behind the curtain, Owen lay on his bedroll near the fire, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of another person in his home. The soft rustling as she settled, a gentle sigh, then eventually the steady rhythm of her breathing. It had been years since he'd shared space with anyone. The sensation was oddly disquieting, not unpleasant exactly, but a stark reminder of how solitary his existence had become. Just one night, he whispered to himself. Tomorrow she'll be gone and everything goes back to normal. But as Owen drifted toward sleep, a strange thought surfaced. For the first time since building his cabin, it actually felt like a home. Morning arrived with golden light streaming through the windows and the unexpected aroma of coffee. Owen blinked awake to find Penny already dressed and tending the stove, her hair neatly pinned beneath a simple bonnet. Good morning, she greeted cheerfully. I hope you don't mind. I found the coffee and thought I'd make myself useful. Owen sat up, disoriented by the domestic scene. How long have you been awake? An hour or so. I'm an early riser, comes from growing up with a preacher father. She poured him a cup of coffee and handed it over. I also mended that shirt I saw hanging by your wash basin. The sleeve was coming apart at the seam. He accepted the coffee wordlessly, unsure how to respond to such unexpected kindness. No one had done something like that for him in years. You didn't have to do that. She shrugged. I wanted to. You're helping me after all. They set out after a simple breakfast, riding side by side on the trail to Clearwater. With 15 miles ahead of them, Owen resigned himself to conversation. What brings a preacher's daughter all the way from? He paused, realizing he didn't know where she was from. Boston, she supplied, and it's quite simple, really. I wanted adventure. He looked at her skeptically. Adventure. Yes, is that so hard to believe? I spent my entire life in one small corner of a very proper world. I taught Sunday school to well-behaved children and attended socials with well-behaved young men. She wrinkled her nose. It was suffocating. So you came to Wyoming Territory, Owen said flatly. Precisely. When I saw the advertisement for a teacher in Clearwater, I knew it was my opportunity. My parents were horrified, of course. Mother cried for days. A shadow crossed her face. Father hasn't spoken to me since I announced my decision. Owen found himself unexpectedly moved by her determination. The West isn't kind to dreamers, Miss Abbott. It has a way of grinding hope into dust. She studied him with those perceptive blue eyes. You sound as though you speak from experience, Mr. Crawford. He looked away, uncomfortable with her insight. Just stating facts. Well, I prefer to reserve judgment until I've seen things for myself, she replied brightly. That's the benefit of adventure, discovering your own truths rather than accepting others. As they rode, Owen found himself sharing more than he intended, details about his ranch, his plans to expand his herd, even stories about Ranger's stubborn personality. Penny listened with genuine interest, asking thoughtful questions that showed she was actually paying attention. By midday, when they stopped to rest the horses by a creek, Owen realized with some alarm that he was enjoying her company. Tell me about Clearwater, Penny said as they sat in the shade of a cottonwood tree. What sort of place is it? Owen considered. Small but growing, got a church, general store, saloon, sheriff's decent. People mostly mind their business. And the children, what are they like? Wouldn't know much about that, he admitted. Don't spend much time in town. She looked surprised. Don't you get lonely out there by yourself? The question struck uncomfortably close to truths Owen preferred not to examine. Being alone and being lonely aren't the same thing, he said stiffly. No, I suppose they're not, she agreed softly. Though in my experience, people who say they prefer solitude are often the loneliest of all. Owen stood abruptly. We should get moving if we want to reach Clearwater before dark. They continued their journey, crossing a shallow river and navigating a stretch of rocky terrain. Owen found himself increasingly aware of Penny's presence, the graceful way she handled her horse, her small sounds of delight at spotting a family of deer, the gentle floral scent that somehow persisted despite their dusty travel. It was mid-afternoon when they crested a hill and spotted 3 riders approaching rapidly from the direction of Clearwater. Owen instinctively moved his horse in front of Penny's. Stay behind me, he instructed, his hand moving to his revolver. Do you know them? She asked, her voice tense. No. And strangers in a hurry rarely bring good news. The riders slowed as they approached, and Owen's unease grew. He recognized the type immediately, hard-faced men with well-worn weapons and calculating eyes. The leader, a tall man with a jagged scar running from his left eye to his jaw, raised a hand in greeting. Afternoon, friend, the man called. Fine day for a ride. Can I help you gentlemen with something? Owen asked coolly. The scarred man's gaze shifted to Penny, a slow smile spreading across his face. That depends. We're looking for a young lady who might be passing through these parts, blonde, pretty, traveling alone. Owen felt Penny stiffen behind him. Haven't seen anyone fitting that description, he lied smoothly. Not many women travel these roads alone. That's so, the man exchanged glances with his companions. Funny because we heard in the last town that a schoolteacher was headed to Clearwater, riding a chestnut mare just like that one, he nodded toward Penny's horse. My wife and I are heading to visit family, Owen improvised. If you're looking for the new schoolteacher, you might try Clearwater directly. The scarred man studied Owen, clearly weighing his words. Your wife, huh? His hand rested casually near his holster. Ain't that interesting? Owen met the man's gaze steadily, his body tense and ready. After a tense moment, the scarred man shrugged. Well, you two have a safe journey, he said, his tone making it clear he didn't believe Owen's story. Maybe we'll see you in Clearwater. As the riders departed, Owen watched until they were well out of sight before turning to Penny. Her face had gone pale. Who were they? He asked quietly. And why are they looking for you? She swallowed hard. I don't know, truly I don't. Her hands trembled slightly on the reins. Do you think they meant me harm? Owen's instincts screamed danger. I think we'd best avoid Clearwater for the time being. Those men will be waiting, and I don't like their intentions. But where will we go, my position? Back to my place, he decided. We'll figure out what's happening and who those men are. The schoolmaster in Clearwater will have to wait another day or two for his new teacher. They altered course, taking a circuitous route back toward Owen's ranch to ensure they weren't followed. Penny remained uncharacteristically quiet, her earlier vivacity dimmed by concern. Why did you tell them I was your wife? She finally asked as they rode. Owen kept his eyes on the trail. Married women are less interesting targets than lone travelers. Husbands tend to object violently to their wives being bothered. I see. She was quiet for another moment. Thank you. That's twice now you've rescued me. Don't thank me yet, he replied grimly. Those men knew too much about you and they weren't local. This isn't coincidence. They reached Owen's ranch as dusk settled over the land. After tending to the horses, they entered the cabin, its familiar simplicity somehow comforting after the day's unsettling encounter. Owen built up the fire while Penny sank into a chair, her usual energy depleted. You need to tell me everything, he said, sitting across from her. Where exactly you're from, why you came west, who might want to find you. She looked up, her blue eyes troubled. I told you the truth, Owen, I'm from Boston. My father is Reverend Thomas Abbott of the 3rd Street Presbyterian Church. I came west because I was offered a teaching position and because, she hesitated, because I was running away, she admitted quietly. Not from the law or anything so dramatic, from expectations, from a life planned out for me without my consent. Owen waited, sensing there was more. My father arranged a marriage for me, she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. To a wealthy church elder, a widower of 52. The wedding was to be next month. She looked up, a flash of defiance in her eyes. I refused. There was a terrible argument. My father said if I didn't honor his wishes, I was dead to him. So you answered an advertisement for a teaching position as far away as possible, Owen concluded. She nodded. I have teaching experience from the Sunday school. I'm qualified for the position. It wasn't just escape, it was a chance at independence. She twisted her hands in her lap. But I can't imagine why anyone would be searching for me. My family may be disappointed, but they wouldn't send men like that. Owen considered her story. It explained her determination and courage, but not the men on the trail. Is there anything else, anyone who might have taken special interest in you before you left? A flush crept up her neck. There was one gentleman, Mr. James Blackwell. He had been courting me despite my father's disapproval. When I announced my plans to leave, he was disturbed. He said I belonged in Boston with him. Disturbed how? She looked uncomfortable. He grabbed my arm rather forcefully, said I'd regret leaving, but surely he wouldn't. She shook her head. He's from one of Boston's finest families. He wouldn't associate with men like those. Owen wasn't so certain. Wealthy men often hired others to do their dirty work. This Blackwell, did he know exactly where you were headed? Yes, she admitted. I didn't make my destination a secret. Everyone knew I was going to Clearwater. Owen stood, pacing the small cabin as he thought. Those men will likely check Clearwater, then start searching nearby. We need to find out who they are and what they want before you can safely continue your journey. I've put you in danger, Penny said miserably. I'm so sorry. This is exactly why I wanted to handle my journey alone, to avoid involving others in my troubles. Yes, and look how well that worked out, Owen replied dryly. You'd have been snake food if I hadn't found you. To his surprise, she laughed, a genuine sound that transformed her worried expression. I suppose you're right, my independent adventure hasn't gone quite as planned. Owen felt an unexpected warmth at her laughter. Get some rest. Tomorrow I'll ride into Whiteridge. It's a smaller settlement about 20 miles south. Might be able to gather information without drawing attention. I'm coming with you, she stated firmly. No, you're not. Too risky. Penny crossed her arms. And staying alone in your cabin while those men search the countryside isn't. I won't cower in hiding, Mr. Crawford. These are my problems, and I intend to face them." They argued for 10 minutes before Owen grudgingly conceded. She was right, leaving her alone might be more dangerous than keeping her close. And there was something to be said for her courage, misguided though it might be. "Fine," he relented, "but you'll do exactly as I say when I say it." No arguments. Agreed, she smiled, victorious. "Now shall I prepare something to eat? You must be hungry after our extended journey." As they shared another meal together, Owen found himself studying Penny when she wasn't looking. There was something remarkable about her resilience, the way she had abandoned security for uncertainty, how she faced danger without crumbling. It reminded him uncomfortably of himself at a younger age, before the frontier had taught him the cost of hope. "You should take the bed again," he said as they finished eating. "I won't displace you a second night," she protested. "The floor will suit me fine." "Penny," he said, surprising them both with his use of her first name, "take the damn bed." She blinked at his tone, then smiled. "Very well, Owen," she emphasized his name with gentle mockery. "Thank you." Later, as he lay by the dying fire, Owen listened again to the soft sounds of Penny's breathing. His cabin felt different with her presence, warmer somehow, despite the tension of their situation. It was an unsettling realization for a man who had convinced himself that solitude was preferable to connection. Sleep eluded him as he contemplated the mysterious riders and their interest in Penny. If they meant her harm, what would he do? The sensible course would be to help her reach the nearest marshal's office, then return to his solitary existence. Yet something in him rebelled against that simple solution. In just 2 days, Penelope Abbott had disturbed the careful isolation he'd built, making him question truths he'd long accepted as immutable. "Damn fool," he muttered to himself, turning over to stare at the ceiling. "She'll be gone soon enough, and everything will return to normal." But as he finally drifted toward sleep, Owen wasn't entirely certain that was what he wanted anymore. The next morning dawned clear and cool. They set out early for Whiteridge, taking a little-used trail that wound through dense pine forest. Owen had insisted Penny wear one of his spare shirts and trousers, her dress being too distinctive if the men were asking questions in the area. "This is surprisingly comfortable," she admitted, adjusting the oversized garments she'd belted at the waist, "though I can't imagine what my mother would say." With her hair tucked under a wide-brimmed hat and the masculine clothing disguising her figure, she might pass for a young man from a distance. Exactly what Owen intended. "Remember," he cautioned as they approached the small settlement, "let me do the talking. Keep your head down and try not to draw attention." Whiteridge consisted of little more than a general store, a saloon, a blacksmith, and a handful of rough cabins. They tied their horses outside the general store and entered the dim interior, where a barrel-chested man with an impressive mustache greeted them from behind the counter. "Morning, strangers. What can I help you with?" Owen removed his hat respectfully. "Just passing through, need to resupply." "Been a while since I visited Whiteridge." "Been some changes," the shopkeeper said amiably. "Got the telegraph line last year. Brings us into the modern age, so they say." Owen feigned surprise. "Telegraph, you say? That's progress." As he selected supplies, he casually asked, "Roads safe these days? Ran into some rough-looking men yesterday. One had a nasty scar across his face." The shopkeeper's expression changed subtly. Them would be the Tanner brothers and their friend. Been staying at the saloon past 3 days, asking a lot of questions about travelers, especially any young women passing through. "That's so," Owen kept his tone neutral. "Any idea what their business is?" The man leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Claim they're looking for a runaway heiress, offering a reward for information, but they got a mean look about them that don't match their story." He eyed Penny suspiciously. "That boy with you looks awful young." "My brother's son," Owen lied smoothly. "Sister-in-law died last winter, taking him to live with my parents in Montana." The shopkeeper nodded sympathetically. "Hard country for orphans. You best be careful on the roads. Those fellows seemed mighty interested in anyone heading north." They completed their purchase and left, Owen subtly positioning himself between Penny and the saloon across the street. As they mounted their horses, the saloon doors swung open and 2 men stepped out, one of them the scarred man from the previous day. "Keep riding," Owen murmured. "Don't look back." They maintained a steady pace until they were well beyond the settlement's edge, then spurred their horses into a gallop, taking a different trail than the one they'd arrived on. "They're looking for me specifically," Penny said when they finally slowed. "A runaway heiress? That makes no sense. My family is respectable but far from wealthy." Owen frowned. "Someone's lying about who you are or why they want you. Either way, it's not good." They rode in troubled silence until they reached a small stream where they stopped to water the horses. "What if I simply turn myself in to the local marshal?" Penny suggested. "Explain the situation." Owen shook his head. "Without knowing who these men are or who sent them, we can't be sure who to trust. For all we know, they could have legitimate-looking papers claiming authority to take you back east." She looked stricken, "So I'm effectively trapped. I can't go to Clearwater, can't seek official help, can't—" She stopped suddenly, her eyes widening as she looked past Owen's shoulder. "Owen." He turned to find the scarred man and his two companions emerging from the trees, guns drawn. "Well, ain't this convenient," the scarred man drawled. "Was hoping we'd catch up with you two again." He gestured with his pistol. "The girl comes with us. You can ride away, cowboy, no harm done." Owen stepped in front of Penny, his voice deadly calm. "That's not going to happen." The scarred man sighed theatrically. "Always gotta be the hard way. Vince, Lester, show this gentleman what happens to folks who interfere with Silas Tanner's business." The other two men moved forward, grinning. Owen tensed, calculating his odds against three armed men. They weren't good. "Wait," Penny stepped forward. "I'll go with you, just don't hurt him." "Penny, no," Owen started. "How touching," Silas mocked. "But we got orders to make an example of anyone helping her. Sorry, friend." What happened next unfolded in a blur of motion. As Vince and Lester approached, Owen dropped to one knee, drawing his revolver in a single fluid movement. His first shot caught Vince in the shoulder, spinning the man around. His second struck Lester's hand, sending the man's gun flying. Silas fired, the bullet grazing Owen's arm as he dove behind a boulder, pulling Penny with him. The horses scattered at the gunfire, whinnying in panic. "Stay down." Owen commanded, returning fire from behind their cover. A bullet splintered stone inches from his face. Silas and his wounded companions had taken positions behind trees, creating a standoff. "You're a dead man, Crawford," Silas shouted. "Ain't nowhere in the territory you can hide from us now." Owen took careful aim and fired, his bullet splintering bark beside Silas's head. "You know my name," he called back. "Means you've been asking about me." "Should have asked a bit more, might have learned I don't miss twice." "Owen, you're bleeding," Penny whispered, pointing to his arm where Silas's bullet had torn his sleeve. "Just a graze," he muttered, though the burning pain suggested otherwise. Vince made a run for better position, and Owen dropped him with a shot to the leg. The man howled in pain, crawling behind a fallen log. "This is your last chance, Crawford," Silas called. "Give us the girl and ride away." "Who sent you?" Owen demanded. "What do you want with her?" Instead of answering, Silas fired again, the bullet whining overhead. Owen counted his remaining ammunition, 4 bullets. Not enough for a prolonged gunfight. They needed a distraction or a miracle. They got both in the form of Ranger, who came thundering back through the trees, spooked by the gunfire but trained to respond to Owen's whistle. Owen seized the opportunity, standing to fire 2 quick shots that forced Silas and Lester to duck behind cover. "Run for the horse," he told Penny, giving her a push. She hesitated. "I won't leave you." "Damn it, woman, go." Penny ran, ducking low, while Owen provided covering fire. She reached Ranger and swung herself into the saddle with surprising agility. Owen backed toward her, firing his last bullet. "Hold on," he shouted, holstering his empty gun and sprinting toward her. Bullets kicked up dirt at his heels as he ran. Penny reached down, gripping his outstretched hand and pulling with all her strength as he leapt. He landed awkwardly behind her, nearly falling before securing his arm around her waist. "Ride," he shouted in her ear. She needed no further encouragement, digging her heels into Ranger's flanks. The horse surged forward, crashing through the underbrush as more bullets whistled past them. They rode hard for nearly an hour, taking the most difficult terrain to discourage pursuit. When they finally slowed, confident they'd lost their pursuers, Owen was lightheaded from blood loss, his arm soaked with blood. "We need to tend that wound," Penny insisted, helping him dismount in a small, sheltered clearing. "Not yet," he said through gritted teeth. "We're still too exposed." But she was already tearing a strip from her shirt to create a makeshift bandage. "Sit down before you fall down, Mr. Crawford. I've had some experience with field medicine. My father insisted I learn nursing skills for missionary work. Too weak to argue, Owen sat against a tree while she cleaned and bound his wound with gentle efficiency. The bullet just grazed you, but it's deep enough to need stitches, she assessed. We'll need to reach your cabin without reopening it. Those men know my name, Owen said, his mind working through the implications. They've been asking questions. Might know where my ranch is. Penny's face paled. What do we do? Owen forced himself to think clearly despite the throbbing pain. There's an old line shack about 5 miles west of here. Used it during my first winter while building the cabin. We'll hole up there until we figure out our next move. It was nearing dusk when they reached the dilapidated shack, a single-room structure nearly hidden among tall pines. Owen had maintained it as a shelter for emergencies, keeping it stocked with basic supplies. Penny helped him inside, where he collapsed onto the narrow cot, his strength finally giving out. Need to check if we were followed, he mumbled, trying to rise. You need to rest, she countered firmly, pushing him back down. I'll keep watch. He wanted to protest, but found his eyes closing against his will. The last thing he remembered was Penny's cool hand on his forehead and her soft voice saying, "Sleep, Owen. I'll protect you this time." Owen drifted in and out of consciousness, his dreams filled with gunfire and blood. When he finally woke fully, moonlight streamed through the shack's single window. Penny sat beside him, her face illuminated by the soft glow of a small oil lamp. "Welcome back," she said quietly. He tried to sit up, wincing at the pain in his arm. "How long was I out?" "About 4 hours. You had a slight fever, but it's broken now." She helped him into a sitting position and offered him water from a canteen. "I checked outside every hour, no sign of pursuit." Owen drank deeply, studying her in the lamplight. She looked exhausted but determined, her blonde hair falling loose around her shoulders. "You should have woken me for my turn at watch," he said. She smiled faintly. "You needed the rest more than I needed sleep." "Penny," he began seriously, "those men know who I am, which means they know about my ranch. We can't go back there." She nodded. "I realized that. While you slept, I've been thinking about our options." "Our options," he echoed. "Yes, our options," she repeated firmly. "I won't have you pretending this isn't your problem too, not after you've been shot defending me." Owen had to admit she had a point. Like it or not, their fates had become entangled. "We need to find out who sent them and why," he said. "The shopkeeper mentioned a telegraph line in Whiteridge. Those men must be communicating with whoever hired them." "I've been thinking about that," Penny said, her expression thoughtful. "There's something strange about this whole situation. Why would anyone claim I'm an heiress? My family is comfortable but not wealthy." Owen considered this. "Could someone else be the actual target? Maybe they've mistaken you for another woman." She shook her head. "They knew exactly where I was headed and what I looked like. This is no case of mistaken identity." She hesitated. "There's something I didn't tell you earlier. I didn't think it relevant, but now I'm not so certain." "What is it?" "My mother's family, the Reynoldses, were quite prominent in Boston society before my grandfather lost most of their fortune in bad investments. My grandmother, however, maintained ownership of a substantial property outside the city." She looked up at Owen. "She died 3 months ago. The reading of her will was delayed due to some legal complications." Owen's mind raced ahead. "So you left before finding out what she might have left you?" "Yes, I wasn't thinking about any inheritance when I decided to leave. I just wanted to escape the marriage my father had arranged." "Someone else might have very different priorities," Owen observed. Penny's eyes widened. "You think someone wants to prevent me from claiming an inheritance?" "Or control it through you," he said grimly. "A husband would have legal rights to his wife's property." "James Blackwell," she whispered. "He began courting me only after my grandmother's death. I thought it was coincidence, but—" "Did you tell anyone when you planned to leave?" "Only my closest friend Margaret and my parents, of course." She looked distressed. "Surely my own father wouldn't." "A man who would force his daughter to marry someone 30 years her senior might do a lot of things," Owen said bluntly. The implications settled between them like a physical weight. If Owen was right, Penny wasn't just running from an unwanted marriage, she was running from people who saw her as nothing more than a means to wealth. "What do we do now?" she asked softly. Owen carefully tested his injured arm, finding it painful but functional. "We need proof of who's behind this. And we need to know what's in that will." The only person who might know outside of Boston is my aunt in Denver, Penny said. She was estranged from the family, but she and my grandmother reconciled before her death. Denver's a long way from here, Owen cautioned. Penny met his gaze steadily. Do you have a bet or suggestion? He didn't. If they were right about the inheritance, Penny wouldn't be safe until they understood exactly what was at stake. We'll need supplies, he said, accepting the inevitable. And we can't risk going back to my ranch or into Whiteridge. What about Clearwater? The men will have checked there by now, but they won't expect us to circle back. Owen considered the risks. There's a back way in, a trail used mostly by trappers. We could reach it by mid-morning if we leave at first light. She nodded, then surprised him by reaching out to touch his hand. I'm sorry for bringing this trouble to your door, Owen. You've lost your home because of me. Her touch sent an unexpected warmth through him. It's just a cabin, he said quietly, can always build another. Still, you didn't ask for any of this. Owen found himself studying her face in the soft lamplight, the determined set of her jaw, the compassion in her eyes, the strength that seemed at odds with her delicate features. Neither did you, he replied. They sat in companionable silence for a moment before Penny spoke again. You should rest more. I'll take first watch properly this time. He started to protest, then saw the stubborn set of her chin and relented. Wake me in 3 hours, and Penny, he hesitated, then continued, thank you for tending my wound and standing watch. She smiled, the expression transforming her tired face. We're in this together now, Owen Crawford. Like it or not. As he settled back onto the cot, Owen was startled to realize that for the first time in years, he didn't feel entirely alone. The thought should have disturbed him. Connection meant vulnerability, and vulnerability got people killed on the frontier. Instead, he found himself drawing comfort from Penny's presence, her quiet determination a counterpoint to his own weathered cynicism. 3 hours, he reminded her, closing his eyes. Not a minute more, she promised. The next morning they set out at dawn, taking a circuitous route toward Clearwater. Owen's arm throbbed steadily, but the bleeding had stopped and Penny's neat bandaging held firm. They traveled in watchful silence, alert for any sign of pursuit. Owen found himself increasingly impressed with Penny's resilience. Despite the danger and discomfort, she never complained, maintaining a steady pace and sharp awareness of their surroundings. How did a Boston preacher's daughter learn to ride so well? He asked as they paused to rest the horses near a small stream. My uncle owned a farm outside the city, she explained. I spent summers there as a child, scandalized my mother by preferring the stables to the parlor. She smiled at the memory. My father called it unladylike, but my uncle encouraged it, said a woman should know how to rely on herself. Wise man, Owen commented. He was, I wish. She stopped, her expression clouding. I wish he'd lived to see me make this journey. He would have understood. Owen studied her thoughtfully. You miss your family. Parts of them, she admitted, not the expectations or the constraints, but yes. I miss who they could have been if they'd truly seen me instead of the daughter they wanted me to be. The simple honesty of her answer struck a chord in Owen. How long had it been since he'd allowed himself to acknowledge such feelings? Since Jeb's death, he'd buried his need for connection so deeply he'd almost convinced himself it didn't exist. They reached the outskirts of Clearwater by mid-afternoon, approaching cautiously via the trapper's trail. The small town appeared peaceful, giving no indication of the danger that had forced them to flee. We need to be quick, Owen said as they dismounted in a wooded area behind the general store. Supplies first, then information. Stay close to me and keep your hat low. Inside the store they gathered only essentials, food, ammunition, medical supplies. The storekeeper, a friendly woman in her 50s, chatted as she wrapped their purchases. You folks passing through? She asked. Heading to Denver, Owen replied, keeping his answers vague. Quite a journey, be careful on the South Road, there was some trouble there yesterday. 3 men causing a disturbance, asking about a missing woman. She lowered her voice. Sheriff ran them off, but they didn't go far, been camping outside town. Owen exchanged a glance with Penny. Appreciate the warning, ma'am. You two married? The woman asked, her eyes taking in their travel-worn appearance. Yes, Penny answered before Owen could speak, her voice firm. Recently. The woman smiled warmly, thought as much. Can always tell newlyweds way you keep checking on each other. My Jacob and I were the same, God rest his soul. Owen felt heat rise in his face but played along. Been on the trail a while. My wife's looking forward to reaching her aunt in Denver. Well, you take care of each other, the woman said, handing them their packages. World's too hard a place to travel alone. Outside, Penny's cheeks were flushed. I'm sorry for the deception. It seemed the simplest explanation for our traveling together. It was quick thinking, Owen acknowledged, oddly affected by the shopkeeper's assumption. And useful information about Tanner and his men. They visited the telegraph office next, where Owen sent a message to Penny's aunt in Denver, using carefully coded language that would alert her to their situation without revealing too much to potential eavesdroppers. As they left the telegraph office, a man's voice called out, "Miss Abbott." They froze, turning slowly. Owen saw a middle-aged man in a formal suit approaching, his expression a mixture of relief and confusion. "Mr. Thornton," Penny whispered, recognition in her voice. "Thank heavens I've found you," the man said, looking nervously around. "I've been terribly worried when you didn't arrive as scheduled." "Keep walking," Owen muttered to Penny, his hand moving toward his gun. "No, it's all right," she assured him. "This is Mr. Thornton, the schoolmaster who hired me." The schoolmaster eyed Owen with clear suspicion. "Miss Abbott, who is this man? And why are you dressed in such a manner?" Penny hesitated, clearly uncertain how much to reveal. Owen made the decision for her. "Perhaps we should continue this conversation somewhere more private, Mr. Thornton. There are men looking for Miss Abbott who mean her harm." The schoolmaster's eyebrows rose in alarm, but he nodded. "My home is just down the street. We can speak there." Once inside Thornton's modest house, Penny explained their situation, omitting only the speculation about her inheritance. The schoolmaster listened with growing concern. "This is most disturbing," he said when she finished. "I received a wire 3 days ago inquiring about your expected arrival date. It claimed to be from your father, but something about it struck me as odd." "What did it say exactly?" Owen asked. "That Miss Abbott had changed her mind about the position and would be returning to Boston immediately. It requested I inform him when she arrived so appropriate transportation could be arranged." Penny paled. "That wasn't from my father." "I suspected as much," Thornton agreed. The tone seemed wrong for a man of the cloth. "That's why I've been watching for your arrival myself." Owen's mind worked quickly. These men, Tanner and his companions, must have been sent to intercept Penny before she could reach Clearwater safely. "But how did they know my route, my exact schedule?" Penny wondered. "Someone close to you betrayed your plans," Owen said grimly. Thornton cleared his throat. "I don't wish to speak ill of anyone, Miss Abbott, but there was a second wire, this one from a Mr. Blackwell, claiming to be your fiancé. He offered a substantial reward for information regarding your whereabouts." Penny's face hardened. "James is behind this. He must have learned about my grandmother's will." "What will we do now?" Thornton asked. "You're welcome to stay here, though I fear it may not be safe for long." Owen shook his head. "We need to keep moving. Tanner and his men are still nearby, and they know we've been in Clearwater." He turned to Penny. "How soon can your aunt respond to our wire?" "If she's home, we could receive a reply by tomorrow." Thornton offered a solution. "Stay at the widow Jensen's place tonight. It's just outside town. She takes in occasional boarders but has no guests currently. I'll bring any telegraph response directly to you." The plan agreed upon, they left Thornton's house cautiously, keeping to back streets until they reached the small farmhouse belonging to Mrs. Jensen. The elderly widow asked no questions when Thornton explained they needed discreet lodging, simply showing them to a pair of small but clean rooms. That evening, after a simple meal, Owen and Penny sat on the widow's porch, watching the sunset paint the distant mountains in shades of gold and purple. "I've been thinking," Penny said, breaking their companionable silence, "about what happens after we reach Denver." Owen had been avoiding that particular thought. "Your aunt will help sort out the inheritance matter. Once that's resolved, you'll be free to return to Clearwater for your teaching position." "And you," she asked softly, "what will you do?" He shrugged, ignoring the hollow feeling the question produced. "Find another patch of land, start over." "Because of me, you've lost your home," she said, guilt evident in her voice. "After everything you've done for me, I feel responsible." "It was just a cabin, Penny," he said quietly, "not really a home." She turned to look at him directly, her expression searching. "What makes a home for you, Owen?" The question caught him off guard. He'd spent so long convincing himself that solitude was preferable, that connections were dangerous, that he'd stopped questioning whether his existence was truly living. "I don't know," he admitted finally. "Haven't had a real home since I was 16. When you came west." He nodded, surprising himself with the desire to share more. "My parents died of fever. I was apprenticed to a blacksmith who treated me like a servant. When I turned 16, I took what little I had and headed west." "Seeking adventure?" she asked, a small smile playing on her lips. "Seeking something," he agreed. "Found work as a ranch hand, learned the trade from Jeb Wilson. He was like a father to me for a few years until—" Owen stopped, the memory still painful. "Until," she prompted gently, "until he was murdered by a man he trusted. A drifter he'd given shelter to." Owen's voice hardened. "That's when I learned the cost of trusting too easily out here." Penny was quiet for a long moment. "I'm sorry about your friend," she finally said. "But Owen, not everyone will betray trust given to them." He looked at her then, really looked at her. This young woman who had braved a dangerous journey alone, who had faced armed men without crumbling, who still believed in the goodness of others despite everything. "Maybe not," he conceded, "but it only takes one." She reached over and took his hand, her touch warm and unexpectedly comforting. "That's true of anything worth having, there's always risk. The question is whether the possibility of joy outweighs the fear of loss." Owen didn't pull his hand away as he might have days earlier. Instead, he found himself tightening his grip slightly, drawing strength from her touch. "You're quite wise for a woman running away from home," he said, a smile softening his words. "Perhaps I simply believe that running toward something is better than running away from it," she replied. They sat in silence as darkness fell, still holding hands, each contemplating paths that suddenly seemed less certain than before. Morning brought Thornton with the eagerly anticipated telegraph reply. The message was brief but clear. "Information correct, property substantial, come immediately, danger real, will meet Central Hotel." "This confirms our suspicions," Owen said, folding the paper. "Your grandmother left you something valuable enough that someone would go to these lengths to control it." "Then we must reach Denver as quickly as possible," Penny determined. "It's the only way to resolve this situation." They prepared to leave immediately, thanking the widow for her hospitality. As they saddled their horses, Owen noticed a plume of dust on the road from town. "Riders coming," he warned, squinting against the morning sun. "At least 3. "Tanner?" Penny asked, her voice tense. "Likely someone in town must have recognized us." Owen checked his revolver. "We need to leave now, take the south trail through the pass." They rode hard, pushing their horses as fast as they dared on the rocky terrain. The sound of pursuit grew steadily closer behind them. "They're gaining," Penny called, glancing over her shoulder. Owen surveyed the landscape ahead, searching for an advantage. "There," he pointed to a narrow canyon entrance partially hidden by scrub pine. "That ravine cuts through to the other side of the ridge, might throw them off our trail." They veered toward the canyon, threading through dense undergrowth until they reached the shadowed passage between towering rock walls. "Stay close," Owen cautioned as they entered the narrow defile. "Trail gets tricky here." The canyon twisted through the ridge, barely wide enough for their horses in places. Halfway through, Owen halted suddenly, raising his hand for silence. "What is it?" Penny whispered. "Listen." A moment of quiet, then they heard it, the echo of hoofbeats entering the canyon behind them. "They found the trail," Owen muttered. "We need to move faster." They urged their horses forward, navigating the increasingly treacherous path. Rounding a sharp bend, Owen's heart sank. A rockslide had partially blocked the passage ahead, leaving only a narrow gap barely passable on foot, much less on horseback. "We'll have to go back, find another way," Penny said, turning her horse. "No time," Owen decided, dismounting quickly. "We'll have to clear enough space to get through." They worked frantically, moving smaller rocks while the sounds of pursuit grew steadily closer. Owen's injured arm protested with every stone he shifted, but he ignored the pain, focusing on creating a path just wide enough for their horses to squeeze through. "That's enough," he finally said, helping Penny remount. "Go first." "I'll follow." She guided her mare carefully through the narrow opening. Owen was about to follow when the first shots echoed through the canyon. Bullets ricocheted off the rock walls as Tanner and his men came into view, rifles raised. "Go, Penny," Owen shouted, firing back to provide cover. "Get through, I'll hold them off." For a terrible moment he thought she would refuse. Then she nodded once, her expression torn, and urged her horse forward through the gap. Owen backed toward the opening, firing methodically to keep their pursuers pinned down. He had almost reached the gap when a bullet struck his thigh, sending him sprawling to the ground. Pain exploded through his leg as he dragged himself behind a boulder. Blood soaked his trouser leg, but the wound wasn't immediately fatal. If he could just reach the gap. "Nowhere to run now, Crawford," Silas Tanner called. "Tell us where the girl's headed, and we might let you live." "Go to hell, Tanner," Owen shouted back, checking his ammunition. 3 bullets left. "You're already there, friend," Tanner laughed. "Bleeding out over a woman who ain't even your concern." Movement at the rockslide caught Owen's eye. Penny had returned, dismounting silently on the other side of the gap. Before he could signal her to flee, she had squeezed back through the opening and was crawling toward him, keeping low behind the scattered boulders. "What are you doing?" he hissed when she reached him. "I told you to go." "I'm not leaving you," she replied simply, already tearing strips from her shirt to bandage his leg. "How bad is it?" "Bullets still in there," he grimaced. "But I can ride if we can reach the horses." Penny peered around their cover. "They're spread out, moving closer. We need a distraction." Owen handed her his revolver. "I've got 3 shots left." "Make them count." She took the gun with steady hands, surprising him again. "My father believed proper young ladies should never touch firearms," she explained, seeing his expression. "So my uncle taught me to shoot when I turned 16. I'm quite good." Before Owen could respond, she leaned out and fired 2 rapid shots. There was a howl of pain, then the sound of scrambling movement as their pursuers sought better cover. "One left," she reported, ducking back. "But I think I hit one of them." Vince, Tanner's angry voice confirmed. "You'll pay for that, girl." "We need to move while they're distracted," Owen said, forcing himself upright despite the searing pain. "Can you help me reach the gap?" Penny tucked herself under his arm, supporting his weight as they shuffled awkwardly toward the rockslide. Every step sent waves of agony through Owen's leg, but he gritted his teeth and kept moving. They had almost reached the gap when Lester appeared on a ledge above them, rifle aimed. "Stop right there." Penny reacted instantly, raising the revolver and firing their last bullet. Her aim was true. Lester dropped his rifle, clutching his shoulder as he stumbled back from the ledge. "Go," Owen urged, pushing her toward the opening. "Get through." This time she obeyed, squeezing through the narrow gap. Owen followed, his wounded leg screaming in protest as he forced himself through the tight space. Bullets sparked against the rocks behind him as he emerged on the other side, where Penny waited with the horses. She helped him mount Ranger, then swung onto her own horse. "Hold on," she instructed. "The canyon widens ahead. We can make better time once we're through." Owen clung to the saddle horn as they rode, fighting to stay conscious as blood continued to seep from his wound. Penny led them through the remainder of the canyon and onto a broad mountain trail that wound down toward the plains below. They rode for hours, stopping only when Owen nearly fell from his horse. In a sheltered grove beside a small stream, Penny helped him dismount and examined his wound. "The bullet needs to come out," she said grimly, "and the bleeding won't stop until it does." Owen leaned back against a tree trunk, his face gray with pain and blood loss. "You'll need to do it." She nodded, her expression determined despite the fear in her eyes. "I'll need to build a fire first to sterilize the knife." While she prepared, Owen watched her methodical movements, struck by her calm efficiency in crisis. When everything was ready, she knelt beside him with his hunting knife, now glowing red from the fire. "This will hurt terribly," she warned, her voice steady. "I'm sorry." He reached for her free hand, squeezing it briefly. "I trust you, Penny." Something flickered in her eyes at his words, surprise, followed by a deeper emotion he couldn't name. She nodded once, then set to work. The pain was excruciating. Owen bit down on a leather strap as Penny probed for the bullet, her hands remarkably steady despite the grim task. When she finally extracted the misshapen lead ball, he nearly passed out from the relief. "Almost done," she murmured, cleaning the wound with whiskey from his saddlebags before stitching it closed with careful precision. "You're doing wonderfully." When she finished, Owen was drenched in sweat but clear-headed. Penny helped him drink water, then prepared a simple meal from their supplies. "We should rest here tonight," she decided. "You've lost too much blood to continue." Too exhausted to argue, Owen simply nodded. As darkness fell, Penny built up the fire and spread their bedrolls close together for warmth. She checked his bandages once more, her touch gentle but sure. "You saved my life," Owen said quietly as she settled beside him. Again. She smiled faintly in the firelight. We seemed to be making a habit of rescuing each other. You came back for me, he still couldn't quite believe it. You were clear, you could have escaped. Penny met his gaze steadily. Did you really think I would leave you behind? Anyone sensible would have, he pointed out. I told you to go. Well, perhaps I'm not sensible, she replied. Or perhaps, she hesitated, then continued softly, perhaps you've become too important to me to abandon. The simple honesty of her words struck Owen deeply. In the short time they'd known each other, Penny had systematically dismantled the barriers he'd built around himself. She'd shown courage, compassion, and loyalty that defied his cynical expectations at every turn. Penny, he began, uncertain how to express what he was feeling. She placed a finger gently against his lips. Rest now, we can talk tomorrow. As Owen drifted toward sleep, he realized something fundamental had shifted inside him. The frontier had taught him that trust was dangerous, that connections led to pain. But Penny Abbott had risked her life for him, not once but repeatedly. In doing so, she had forced him to question truths he'd accepted as immutable. Maybe, just maybe, some connections were worth the risk after all. Morning revealed that Owen's wound, while painful, showed no signs of infection. With Penny's help, he fashioned a crude crutch from a fallen branch, allowing him to move without reopening the injury. Denver's still 4 days' ride, he calculated, studying their map. But there's a settlement called Riverton about 20 miles south. Might be safer to rest there before continuing. Penny agreed. You need proper medical attention, and our horses need rest after yesterday's hard riding. They traveled slowly, Owen gritting his teeth against the constant throbbing in his leg. By mid-afternoon, the small settlement of Riverton came into view, little more than a trading post, a saloon, and a cluster of rough cabins. Let me do the talking, Penny said as they approached. You look too close to collapsing to be convincing. Owen had to admit she was right. The blood loss and pain had left him light-headed and weak, barely able to stay upright in the saddle. They stopped first at a small building marked Doctor, where an elderly man with spectacles examined Owen's wound with professional interest. Nice stitching, he commented, inspecting Penny's handiwork. You've had medical training. Some, she replied modestly. Will he be all right? The doctor nodded. Clean wound, no infection. Bullet missed the bone and major vessels. Lucky man. He rebandaged Owen's leg. Needs rest, though. At least 2 days before traveling further. At the town's only boarding house, Penny registered them as Mr. and Mrs. Crawford, explaining they were headed to Denver to visit family. The matronly owner seemed satisfied with the story, showing them to a small but clean room with a single bed. I'll sleep on the floor, Owen insisted once they were alone. You most certainly will not, Penny countered firmly. Not with that leg, the bed is plenty large enough for both of us. Too exhausted to argue, Owen allowed her to help him into the bed. He fell asleep almost instantly, his body finally surrendering to the demands of healing. When he woke, it was dark outside, and Penny was sitting by the window, staring out at the starlit sky. You should rest too, he said softly. She turned, smiling when she saw he was awake. I was just thinking. About what? About how different my life has become in such a short time. She moved to sit on the edge of the bed. A week ago, I was a proper Boston lady heading west to be a schoolteacher. Now I'm traveling under an assumed name, digging bullets out of handsome cowboys and fleeing armed pursuers. Owen felt warmth spread through him at her casual description of him as handsome. Regretting your adventure? Strangely, no, she admitted. Despite the danger, or perhaps because of it, I feel more alive than I ever have. She hesitated, then added softly, and I've met someone who makes me believe that connection can be worth any risk. The implication of her words hung in the air between them. Owen reached for her hand, drawing her gently closer. Penny, he said, his voice rough with emotion, I've spent years believing the frontier was no place for tenderness. That caring for someone was just another way to get hurt. He met her gaze directly. You've made me question everything I thought I knew. She moved closer still, her blue eyes luminous in the dim light. And what have you concluded? That some things are worth the risk, he whispered. Some people are worth any risk. When their lips met, it was with the gentle certainty of two people who had already faced death together and chosen each other despite the danger. The kiss deepened, speaking of longing and discovery and the promise of something neither had dared hope for. I think I've been falling in love with you since you jumped from that boulder into my arms, Owen admitted when they finally parted. Penny smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. And I since you came back for me in the canyon when any sensible man would have ridden away. She curled against his side, careful of his injured leg, and they talked late into the night, sharing stories of their pasts, dreams for the future, and the unexpected journey that had brought them together. In the morning, Owen woke to find Penny still nestled against him, her blonde hair spread across his chest. For the first time in years, he felt not just alive but truly at peace. They spent 2 days in Riverton, resting and preparing for the final leg of their journey to Denver. On the afternoon of the second day, as they sat on the boarding house porch watching the sunset, Owen reached a decision. After we sort out this inheritance business, he said, taking Penny's hand, what would you think about us finding a place together, not just any place but a home? Her face lit with joy. Are you asking what I think you're asking, Owen Crawford? I'm saying I love you, Penny Abbott, that I want to build a life with you wherever that might be, he smiled ruefully. It's sudden and probably foolish, but... She silenced him with a kiss. Yes, she said simply when they parted, yes to all of it. Their journey to Denver took 3 more days, traveling cautiously and watching for signs of pursuit. Owen's leg healed steadily, though it remained stiff and painful when overtaxed. They reached the city on a crisp autumn afternoon, the bustle and noise a stark contrast to the wilderness they'd traversed. Following the instructions in the telegraph, they made their way to the Central Hotel, where Penny inquired after her aunt. Mrs. Alina Reynolds is expecting you, the desk clerk informed them, sending a bellboy to escort them to a suite on the 3rd floor. The woman who greeted them was tall and elegant, with silver-streaked dark hair and the same blue eyes as Penny. She embraced her niece warmly before fixing Owen with an appraising look. And this must be the young man who rescued you, she said, extending her hand. Your telegram was intriguingly vague about the details. After introductions and refreshments, they related the full story of their journey. Alina listened with growing concern. I suspected something like this when I received word of your grandmother's will, she said when they finished. The property she left you isn't just land, Penelope. It's the old Reynolds shipping offices and warehouses along Boston Harbor. Warehouses? Penny looked confused. What value would those have? The shipping business failed years ago. The business failed, yes. But the location has become extraordinarily valuable as the harbor expands. Alina smiled grimly. The property is worth approximately $50,000 now and will likely triple in value within 5 years. Owen let out a low whistle. $50,000 was a fortune, and James Blackwell knew this, Penny realized. He must have learned about the will somehow. Alina nodded. Blackwell's family has been trying to acquire that section of the harbor for years. When your grandmother refused to sell to them, they must have seen marriage to you as an alternative approach. And my father, Penny asked hesitantly, do you think he knew? Thomas has always been more concerned with social position than money, Alina replied carefully. But the Blackwell family is very influential in Boston church circles. Their support would mean a great deal to his ambitions. Penny absorbed this with quiet dignity. So Blackwell hired Tanner and his men to bring me back for a forced marriage. It appears so, Alina's expression hardened, but we can put a stop to that immediately. I've already contacted my attorney. As executor of your grandmother's estate, I can transfer the property directly to you with legal protections that would prevent any husband from controlling it. That would certainly remove Blackwell's incentive, Owen observed. Indeed, once the papers are signed, you'll be a wealthy woman in your own right, Penelope, Alina smiled, free to make whatever choices you wish about your future. Penny looked at Owen, her eyes conveying a wordless question. He nodded slightly, understanding her concern. Aunt Alina, Penny began carefully, there's something else you should know. Owen and I, that is, we've developed feelings for each other during our journey. Alina's eyebrows rose slightly, but she smiled. I rather gathered that from the way you look at each other. We intend to marry, Penny continued, her voice gaining confidence, once this situation is resolved. I see, Alina studied Owen with renewed interest. And how do you feel about marrying a woman who will soon be quite wealthy, Mr. Crawford? The question was direct, almost challenging. Owen met her gaze steadily. Mrs. Reynolds, when I fell in love with your niece, she was a schoolteacher with nothing but the clothes on her back and a derringer in her handbag. Her inheritance changes nothing about how I feel or what I want, which is simply a life with her. He took Penny's hand. As for the money, it's hers to use as she sees fit. I have 2 strong hands and a good head for ranching. I can provide for us without it. Eleanor's expression softened. A refreshingly honorable perspective, Mr. Crawford. She turned to Penny. He'll do, I think. The next several days were a flurry of activity. Eleanor's attorney prepared the necessary paperwork to secure Penny's inheritance while also filing formal complaints against Blackwell and the Tanner gang with both the local authorities and the Pinkerton Detective Agency. With the evidence we've gathered, Blackwell will find it difficult to escape prosecution for conspiracy and attempted kidnapping, the attorney assured them. As for Tanner and his men, there are already warrants for their arrest in 3 states. On their 4th day in Denver, as Owen and Penny were returning to the hotel after meeting with the attorney, they spotted a familiar figure in the hotel lobby, the scarred face of Silas Tanner. Owen pulled Penny behind a pillar. How did he find us? He must have followed our trail to Riverton, then guessed we were heading to Denver, Penny whispered. What do we do? Owen scanned the lobby. There's a side exit through the restaurant. Go to your aunt's suite and lock the door. I'll find the hotel detective. I'm not leaving you again, she insisted. Penny, please, I can't protect you properly if I'm worried about you getting caught in crossfire. She hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. Be careful. As she slipped away toward the stairs, Owen approached the front desk, discreetly informing the clerk of Tanner's presence and reputation. Within minutes, the hotel detective and 2 police officers entered the lobby. Tanner spotted them immediately, his hand moving toward his gun. The officers drew their weapons, ordering him to surrender. What followed was chaos, Tanner diving behind a sofa as gunfire erupted across the elegant lobby. Hotel guests screamed and scattered, seeking cover from the flying bullets. Owen took advantage of the distraction to circle behind Tanner, approaching from the restaurant entrance. As the outlaw rose to fire at the officers again, Owen brought the butt of his revolver down hard on the back of Tanner's head. The man crumpled, his gun clattering to the marble floor. He's wanted for attempted murder in Wyoming Territory, Owen informed the officers as they handcuffed the unconscious outlaw. And for trying to kidnap Miss Penelope Abbott on behalf of James Blackwell of Boston. With Tanner securely in custody and singing like a canary for leniency, the remaining threads of danger unraveled quickly. Telegrams from Boston confirmed that Blackwell had fled the city upon learning of the investigation, his hasty departure viewed as confirmation of guilt. A week later, with all legal matters settled, Owen and Penny stood with Eleanor in the hotel garden, discussing their plans. You're certain you won't return to Boston, even to clear your name? Eleanor asked her niece. Penny shook her head. My life is here now in the West with Owen. Besides, your letters will do more to rehabilitate my reputation than my presence ever could. And Clearwater, Eleanor pressed. Your teaching position. I've written to Mr. Thornton explaining everything, Penny said. He was very understanding and has already found another teacher. Eleanor turned to Owen. And what are your plans, Mr. Crawford? Will you rebuild your ranch? Owen exchanged a glance with Penny before answering. Actually, we've been discussing something different. There's land for sale near Silverton, good grazing, plenty of water, close enough to town for Penny to possibly teach part-time if she wishes. It's beautiful country, Penny added enthusiastically. High meadows with wildflowers in summer, aspen groves that turn gold in autumn. Owen says it's perfect for raising horses as well as cattle. Sounds lovely, Eleanor smiled. And the inheritance funds will certainly help establish a fine operation. We're thinking of calling it New Beginnings Ranch, Penny said, her eyes bright with excitement, because that's what it represents for both of us. 3 weeks later, Owen stood on the porch of their newly constructed cabin, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of purple and gold. The first snow of winter had dusted the distant peaks, but here in the valley, autumn still lingered in a blaze of aspen gold. Behind him, the cabin door opened, and Penny stepped out to join him, slipping her arm around his waist. Beautiful, isn't it? She said softly. Owen turned to look at her, his wife of 2 weeks, her face glowing in the fading light, more beautiful to him than any landscape. Perfect, he agreed, drawing her closer. The construction of their ranch was progressing rapidly. With Penny's inheritance providing capital and Owen's knowledge of ranching guiding the operation, they had already purchased a small herd and hired 2 reliable hands. The main house would be completed before spring, but for now, the cozy cabin was more than enough. I received a letter from Mr. Thornton today, Penny mentioned. The school board in Silverton has asked if I'd consider teaching 3 days a week once the new schoolhouse is completed this spring. Will you accept? Owen asked, though he already knew the answer from her expression. I think so, she smiled. It seems I'm destined to be a teacher after all, just under very different circumstances than I originally imagined. Owen laughed, pulling her into a proper embrace. I don't think either of us ended up where we expected when this journey began. No, she agreed, her eyes shining with love. Something much better found us instead. As they stood together watching night settle over their new home, Owen reflected on the strange path that had brought them here. He had never expected to find love when he rescued a girl lost in the wilderness. He had never expected to build a life with someone who challenged his most fundamental beliefs about connection and vulnerability. But the frontier he had discovered was full of unexpected blessings for those brave enough to risk their hearts. In Penny, he had found not just a partner but a home, the true home he had been searching for since he first rode west. I love you, Penny Crawford, he whispered against her hair. She turned in his arms, rising on tiptoe to kiss him tenderly. And I love you, Owen Crawford, always. Behind them, lamplight spilled from the cabin windows, warm and inviting against the gathering darkness. Before them stretched the vast promise of the frontier, no longer a place of solitary survival but a landscape of possibility, ready to be shaped by their shared dreams. Hand in hand, they turned and walked into the light of home.